Tyranno Ex. This is, well, you can blame dominant species on why I'm playing this. This has been a long time kind of fun game with a theme of, much as dominant species has a theme, it's not really any kind of simulation, right? Although it violates less of my suspension of disbelief than dominant species does. But it's a game first and foremost, with a dressing that somewhat handles the topic. I'm not going to say subject because I see these fading little distinctions. To me, theme is actually something that I'd look towards something that you could shift across many different types of games. I think you'd have to stretch to make this one not be about evolution. I think it would actually be easier to make dominant species as about something else. Anyway, this isn't so much about evolution as survival of the fittest. This was, I think, originally a Euro game, actually, a very early one, and Avalon Hill picked it up along with Showbiz, which were both kind of interesting little designs that you kind of sat back and said, wow, Avalon Hill's doing some kind of neat stuff. In this particular case, what you've got is a combination of a buckets of dice combat type system, along with some really interesting mechanisms for determining what critters people are going to have, which that's actually pretty simplistic. But more importantly, what the environment's going to look like. Your critters, unlike in dominant species, are going to have a fixed set of things that they like. And that's always been one of the disappointments I had about this game, was that your creatures don't really evolve. They get better, but they don't evolve to deal with reacting to different circumstances. My grail had always been to mix this with quirks, and somewhere I have a few notes for that. Queer animals, just a few ideas that I wanted to put together, and maybe I'll try to put that together at some point. Because Quirks is such a beautiful, funny little game, but it doesn't work because it doesn't have a way of resolving conflict that's not deterministic. And I don't really like deterministic games. It actually relies on not knowing what the values of the creatures are. And after a couple of plays, you get used to what they are. Okay, so what about this one? Well, I skimmed through the rules. I was almost going to just do it without knowing them, but in essence, this is a game where you're going to be collecting victory points over the course of the game. How do you score them, though? I don't know how you keep track of them. Okay. I think you keep track of them on paper, because there is no little trail going around the game. We've got 4 different colored players, and they will each have their own little screen, which gives the sequence of play, which is actually quite simple, and this gives you most of the rules on it. And you set this up, and within that you can hide your little environmental chits, which are your secret items that you're allowed to play throughout the game. Okay. You're going to shuffle these critters and deal them into 4 stacks, and there's an option where these things get shuffled in too, and they'll create some sort of stronger critters from the beginning. I never know if I want to play with that, and the other option bothers me even more, so we'll see. Each player gets their color. The yellow player gets the start marker. And everybody also gets these little triangles, which are their bonus marker. Those are going to be worth 5 victory points at the end of the game if you don't use them, but they have neat little effects that are worth more than 5 victory points in general. You also have these little dice, which are going to indicate how strong your creatures are, and they also indicate who owns a creature if that's an issue. It doesn't really have to be, because you have these rows that determine it, but it's kind of helpful, and there's no reason you can't put a 1 on a critter to cover it up and just kind of show who owns it. They work fine for that. Then you have these numbered counters here, which show how many of that critter exist in the world at that point. The more common a critter is, the more dice you're going to get in combat. The stronger a critter is, the easier it is to hit with your dice. Whatever that's supposed to mean. It's a competition mechanism, and it works okay, although it may not make a lot of sense for, carnivores to be competing with herbivores and such not. You should be competing in the niche, which is why I like American megafauna particularly. And Quirks actually handles that as well, but in its own little way. That looks like all the components. You also have, well, I haven't really discussed these. You have these little guys, some of which seem to have gotten a little worse for the wear. Guess I'll have to get my glue stick on that one. Which you're going to draw a pile of these, and they're going to give you the types of environment that the types of environmental factors that can affect the survival of your critters. And you'll see each critter has a set of 3 of these. Some critters, like Tyranno Ex, have a doubling up of one particular element. They're very good with that element, but that makes them less survivable overall, although they can really kick ass when that element's common. Okay, so how does the game go? Well, like I said, you've got a set of four decks of these critters, and they're going to give you the face up of the critter. They're randomized at the beginning. And do you set up some elements? Everybody gets 12 of the elements on their own at random. And then there's going to be 1 at random in each of these spaces to indicate what the starting environment is. Now that starting environment means almost nothing, but it could matter a little bit. The evolve marker is going to be your turn marker, and that's going to start here. And that's going to go through, there's going to be 3 evolutionary segments, I think you'd call it, in the first turn, 4 in the second turn, 5 in the third, and all following turns. And then in between those segments, you get to do some combat, some, competitions and whatever. And you also then evolve further along on the charts, and then you'll score victory points based on where your cards are. And that's all written down. So the first thing that happens in each turn is each player is going to pick one of these critters and put it down in his column. If I'm the green player, I'd put this here. And if I want to be anal retentive about it, I'd put my little die there to indicate, hey, that's mine, I'm green. And that can be helpful because these colors are kind of muted. Although these are available, they're going to be filled with little counters. And remember, we're going to have a bunch of these on the board. To begin with, we'll just throw some of these out. Now, the Tyrannosaurus, it doesn't matter which one, he's in whichever one his player fits, so it doesn't matter that the green is aligned with this. There's not different environs in this game. There's just the state of the world. There's different environmental slots, but they don't affect the column, the row that you're on. So this guy doesn't look very healthy. He's only got one thing to keep him alive at this point. After you select your critters, then it is your goal to start doing elemental play for the environment. On the first turn of the game, each player is going to get 2 critters. The first one, I think, goes in this box, and the second one in this one. Maybe I'm mistaken. Yep. The first one goes in the 0 box column, and then the second one, if I'd pick a second critter, would go here. But first everybody picks the first one, then everybody picks the second one. Great. Now, during the environmental influence phase, which is the next step, we have this here that covers that. I have 3 options. I can grab up to 3 of my little chits and draw new ones to replace that. Another option is I can place 1 or 2 chits face down, so nobody knows what I've got, in evolutionary rows of my choice. They could both be in the same row. and that'll have an effect when I do it. Or third, I can do nothing. And at the point where I play these, now immediately we have to determine whether or not the environment has just changed. Okay. So, as soon as the number of disks in the evolution row of a particular column is greater than the number of disks in the environment column, the already existing environment. So, for example, if at the beginning of the game I've got Tyrannosaurus, I'll throw a couple of chits down here. Then what happens is this gets flushed into the thing, and these are going to be assessed. If any one element type is more numerous than the rest, that element type, all of the pieces in it, will be moved into here. So for example, if this had been what I played instead, let's say we were this, which would make sense. This would get tossed away, these would get flipped over, and because there's two of the same, they would go in here. Likewise, if we were in this position, these two would go in here. This one would stay though. And that now becomes the new fixed environment that all the critters on the board have to cope with for a little while. Now it is possible, let's get a situation here. Okay. Okay, let's say there's 3 greens in here, so there have to be 4 pieces. Is that going to work? No, we need more green pieces or something for me to do this. We need more pieces. Okay, let's say there's a lot of green pieces in here. There's 5 green pieces in here. And let's find some others. There's a blue. This would put us to 6. So we immediately went. Say somebody decides to toss 2 new yellows in here. Now I've just exceeded this, so these go away. All of these flip up. I cheated, or I didn't do what I expected. Okay, let's say there's 5 of these in here. I don't think very carefully. And there's these 5 in here at this point. Now this is a point where these do not exceed the amount in here, so there's no issue. But if I throw 2 more yellow in here, these do indeed get swept away. Everything gets turned up, and we have to assess. And there's sort of a memory game here, because these are going to get turned back down after they get used. So now, this is greater than any other number, and it goes up here. But now there's still 4 in here, which is greater than these 3. So these 3 get swept aside, and then say yellow has 2, and there aren't 2 of these. And then these guys get flipped back over, and they're prepared for another attempt to, another piece that goes in there would get rid of the yellow ones. So if you get a lot of pieces in the current environment, if you have a lot of matching pieces in there, that can cause some multiple chained events of change to happen at once. Okay. And I hope that made some sense somehow. Now, if you change the environment, and it has to actually change, which is to say something has to get wiped away, and that's all that is required for change, actually, because if you empty it, that's good enough. Even if you put the same environmental pieces in, type of environmental pieces in there, you've changed the environment by triggering that. If you manage to change the environment, but your critter is now matched completely, this isn't a great choice of a critter to match completely, because he has that double boner, and we don't want to talk about that right now. So let's say this is the situation, and I've thrown 2 pieces in here. I just changed the environment. Oh look, these go up here. Now this is matched by 3 different columns. It's got 3 different colors. It's got those 3 columns have to be there. Then I get a point of strength for that critter. And my strength goes up by 1. And remember, that means I'm going to be rolling for 2s instead of 1s when I attack. Now, for Tyrannosaurus Rex, because he has 2 bones and a green, it's pretty much the same thing, except 2 of these rows have to have bones in them. There's only 1 thing that can be in any one column. It has to be at the end of the environmental phase. You can't have it happen during a rapid change, I don't believe. No, I think you can. I think it could be a temporary change. For example, if we were in this position immediately after I changed this, now this was going to go away. Well, but this guy would still go up his strength, and then this would go away. And then, oh, we got 2. We don't have more of any one, so they flip back over and it stays empty. And that's why you have to remember what's where, because you have to remember what you match. And that takes away from what I'm going to be doing solo. Now, at the end of the entire environmental phase, once you go through all 3, 4, or 5 turns, environmental checks, if a creature no longer has any of its discs in play, and if we had this, for example, that wouldn't be allowed. That creature just dies. It doesn't matter how strong it is. There are none of it in existence, and it gets discarded. It's out of play. But at the end of the phase, each player, starting with the last player to go in a particular round, has the option, and yellow would not be the last player. In the first round, red would be the last player under a normal game. Now, I'm going to play counterclockwise, but we won't worry about that right now. Red would have the first option to play this. In order to put up to 2 more discs on the board in a hope of changing the environment to either wipe out somebody else's critters or save their own or whatever. It's usually worth it to save a critter if you think it's going to make points later in the game. Now, if the last person to have played, I'm sorry, actually that would be, this is for how I play. Blue would be the last player normally, right? Because normally people go clockwise and I go counterclockwise and I can't think. Okay, so if the last player chooses to exercise the option or not, the next to last player gets the option to do it. Now, if the last player had chosen to exercise it, the next to last player has the right to trump that choice. So the person who had the start marker has this huge advantage in that they get to see what everybody else wants to do and then decide if they're going to allow it to happen or if they're going to spend their own marker. These are only 1 use throughout the game, though, so it's a pretty big expense to throw that down. You better be getting something out of it or stopping someone from getting something huge. That's 1 use you can use for that. There are others, but that's usually the most valuable. Then we go to a battle phase. Hey, let's take a look at this. Let's help out that Tyrannosaurus there a little bit. And let's throw a couple of greens in here and another blue. It's just a setup. Okay. In battle, each player, starting with the starter, selects an animal on the board to attack any one opposing animal and resolves the battle. Now, I believe this is at option. Yeah, it's at your option. So you don't have to make an attack if you don't wish to. Basically, you can attack with one of your critters to any other critter on the board. It doesn't matter, they could be up here in these special spaces, whatever. And notice that out of play, that's going to be important, that you fall off the evolutionary track eventually if you're old enough. So the strength of your animal is just going to be this die on here. And we've already explained one way that goes up. It can also go up through battle. The frequency, which we relate with these black markers, is going to be the total number of element discs that match elements on your animal. But if you have an animal with double of one disc, it counts this type double. So for example, let's take a look at how much each one's worth. This guy's worth 1, 2 green, 1, 2 blue, another blue. So he's got a value of 5 he would have on him. And Tyrannosaurus has 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Then you're going to fight rounds of combat until one side wins 2 rounds of combat. Rounds of combat are going to be fought rolling dice. You will roll a number of dice equal to your strength, and you're aiming to get your die roll. Whoever gets the most hits in any given round wins that round. So for example, in this case, red is going to go for that big elk thing. I got 2 hits for red and only 1 hit for the Tyrannosaurus, so red would have won the first round. If a creature wins without ever losing a round of combat, it kills the opposing critter, and that critter's discarded. If a creature wins 2 rounds, but the other one won 1, that other creature gets a suppressed marker, and that means he's not going to fight, I think, and he's not going to score any points. He's not going to attack anymore. Let me make sure I've got that. A suppressed animal will still advance, but will earn no points. Yeah, he may be able to be attacked. Okay. A creature that's suppressed loses a point of strength down to a minimum of 1. The attacker gains a point of strength as long as his strength is less than or equal to the critter that he just defeated, or the victor. At the end of the battle phase. I did the yeah. At the end of the battle phase, the starter has the option to play his bonus chit in order to make another battle. If he doesn't do this, the next player can do it, and so on until everybody's passed, or one player has taken an extra battle. The extra battle can use a unit that's already attacked that turn, but he cannot attack a suppressed animal. Yeah, suppressed animals can't be attacked. Suppressed animal cannot be attacked by another player, nor can it attack. Yeah, I thought so. All right. Now we go to the evolution stage, which is really the scoring aspect of this game. And in general, what happens is each card just slides down, making room for us to draw new cards for the next turn. Now, things get complicated when you slip over to here. Let's say we get a few critters here. A critter, and these don't really matter, will slide into this spot. Now, which one? Okay, first, any suppressed critters go in there first, and they're not going to score any points, so there's no bonus for that. Next, unsuppressed critters go in. Great. Okay, but there are further tiebreakers for that, which is reverse order of frequency. So the animal with the least dice will go in first. If the suppressed wasn't in here, Tyranno Ex would still go in first. That's important because now when this one goes in, he's going to push the Tyrannosaurus up a space. And you definitely need a die in here to indicate who owns what, because there's no color. It's not like the rows where there's color on them, which is why you need the ones for certain. Okay. Now, if we had a whole pile of critters here, and let's give Tyrannosaurus a 2, but let's make him suppressed. Tyrannosaurus is suppressed, so he goes in first. Then this one, no. Then one of these two would go in. Okay. If they're still tied at this point, like these guys are, they fight an additional round of battle to break the tie. The loser will go in first, and you just keep rolling until one person loses a battle round. I don't think you can get a strength bonus off that kind of battle. So then one of these would go in, the loser of that battle. Then one of these, the other one would go in, and now this goes in, this drops off the board, and these guys go forward. Okay? As soon as an animal stack is completely eliminated, is completely used up, the game accelerates, and from then on we're going to do 2 columns of advance on each of these sets of turns. Okay, and there's some special stuff up here. This red here, it says no element swapping or gaining strength is permitted during rounds 4 and 5. That's important when you place, just jumping around in the rolls for no real reason. When you place pieces in here, normally you can get a strength increase, well, not on those red turns. And you can't discard elements on those red turns in order to draw more. Now, when you play elements, I think you get new ones as well. I think I missed that. I'm not seeing it. Maybe you get them at the end of the turn. We'll see. Okay. So anyway, the game speeds up once one of the animal decks is out, and we go forward 2 spaces, which can knock you off without scoring more easily. Then we're going to do a reckoning phase, where you get points for every non-suppressed animal you have on the board. Now these spaces produce the points indicated on them. These spaces produce the points indicated on them for each animal in them, plus 1 extra point for each animal, for each of these spaces that's empty. So if you wiped out opposing animals, you can score extra points. So if you wiped something out back here and are sitting alone, let's say you're here alone, okay, you get 0 points if you're here, but after you advance, nothing's going to ever move into these spaces if you killed everything off back here. So now you're worth 3, 4, 5, 6 points. Now you're worth 6, 7, 8, 9 points. And now 9, 12 points. And then eventually you slide up to the bonus area. So that's something to keep in mind in terms of how many points you're going to get. Doesn't really mean anything. There's no bonus points for these being empty for anyone. The game will end if a player has no animals remaining in the world and all of the animal card stacks have been depleted. So all animals have to be gone and a player has to have nothing on the board at the end of a turn for the game to end. And then you simply count the points, which you've already added them in for the end of the turn. So you've got a running total. Now what I don't get... okay, so this is not clarified in the rules that I know of, but maybe it is. Yeah, everybody draws tokens to go back up to 12. So if you played some, you get replenishment for that at that point. You don't get it immediately. And that's the game. Start playing it, and I expect this will probably take me through tomorrow, and that's it. But it's, you know, it's a fun little diversion type of game. It's the kind of thing you sit down maybe at the end of the night and play a little bit of something like this. It's not going to really break your brain. It's also not terribly long. I think it takes about an hour. It'll take me all day, but you know, unlike Dominant Species, it suits a niche that works well in my gaming life. I don't want to sit down and hurt myself in order to play something that doesn't tell me a good story. Does this tell a great story? Nah. This is a die rolling exercise. I mean, there's strategy in it. There's no question. There's strategy in selecting these, in trying to outguess what somebody else has, in trying to manipulate the values and the points on the board, in making the decision on when to play these suckers. There's a lot of little pieces in it, but they're not too heavy. And you can't really calculate out and be sure you're making sort of an optimal move, because you got dice and you got unknowns. So that that puts a layer of padding between what you have to really worry about and keep track of and handle and calculate all the time, to kind of, okay, look, do you want to do probability analysis on the game as it's in progress? No, of course not. All right, up this one goes, and we'll see how much fun I have playing it solo. I've done it before and kind of enjoyed it, but it's much more fun playing with people with something like this.